The first album I ever convinced my mother to buy for me was Black Sabbath's Paranoid. I had an older friend. He probably wasn't my friend. Our parents were friends, and therefore he would be forced to take care of me while they visited with each other. He told me that Paranoid was the best album ever recorded. I remember my mother and I going to the local mall. There was a kiosk which smelled like wood and incense. An attractive young lady, who was probably having a good laugh at my request, explained that they didn't have any Paranoid albums in stock. They did have Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. She handed it to me. I looked at it. The album art on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is far superior to the artwork on Paranoid, which I had not seen yet. Had I known the difference, I probably would have chosen Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Fortunately, I didn't. We reluctantly turned away and tried to think of where else they might sell record albums. We decided to look in a department store called Zayre's. As I remember, and now that I have researched my facts, I see that the name actually was Zayre, singular. Zayre was short for sehr gut, which in German means very good or it's good. Zayre was known for having a large selection of interesting items. If you couldn't find it elsewhere, the item might be at Zayre. Zayre did have Paranoid. My heart fell when I saw that wretched album cover. I think I asked my mother if we could go back to the mall and get Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, but she said no, it's either this or nothing, which was another lucky break. When we arrived back at home, I naturally tore away the plastic wrapping to look inside. Paranoid at the time was a gatefold album. The size for retail display is the same at 12.5 inches, but opening the cover revealed a shot of the band in a field somewhere that was twice the width. From the left, Tony, then Geezer standing, Bill for some reason was sitting, he must have been tired, and Ozzy standing with arms akimbo. I remember thinking they looked very much like hippies, which I was used to observing around my hometown. I searched desperately for some signs of coolness. I was used to the artwork of Frank Kirby, so I was visually oriented as a consumer. Geezer wore a giant custom leather belt. I liked it. It looked like something Jack Kirby might draw, something that Thor might wear. I searched for years, but I could never find a similar item. It wouldn't have fit through my belt loops anyway. Ozzy was wearing a giant crucifix, which I also found appealing. Bill wore a shirt with stars on it. I searched for years for a shirt like that. I finally found one, although the stars were smaller. I purchased it and promptly became too fat to fit into it. Tony was wearing a leather wristband. I have always been fond of large leather wristbands. I had one for years that was imitation leather. Tony, like Geezer, wore his belt on the outside of his shirt. Hanging from the belt was a small leather bag. I wondered what was in the bag. I put the album on my mother's Sears turntable, which had a giant woofer in it. It was a tube stereo. I suppose that for the time it was probably pretty good. War Pigs started. The album was sounding promising. I liked things that were dark. Not really dark. Things like Dracula and weird Mystery Tales comics. The album was sufficiently gloomy. It's a point of contention whether Black Sabbath are indeed the inventors of heavy metal. For many years I heard Tony, and I believe even Geezer, saying that they were hard rock, not metal. I think I would tend to agree and dub Judas Priest the inventors of the true heavy metal genre. But there can be no denying that Sabbath invented doom. The chords, the grim lyrics, the slowed tempos with Bill's drums and Geezer's bass featuring prominently, and Ozzy's strange nasally timbre. I must admit that although I liked the album, and it must be said that I was 8 years old, I was somewhat disappointed. The mention of the war and intravenous drug use reminded me too much of the hippie scene, which we were trying to move beyond. It was a time for gods and magic. Now, of course, I understand the brilliance of the album. I'm proud to have it as my introduction to heavy metal and hard rock. I believe that it shaped my ear in a good way, despite the little injections of pseudo-jazz. When I listen to the album now, rarely, after all, because I've been hearing it over and over for almost 50 years, When I listen to the album now, I hear a band that was talented and tight with a unique sound. Even the production, I feel, is very good for the time. From Black Sabbath came Ozzy's first 2 solo albums with Randy Rhoads on guitar. There can be no denying that those albums are metal. And of course, Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, which shaped Dio's path to become the world's greatest metal singer ever. I suggest that you listen to it again right away. If you have never heard the album in its entirety, that is the only way to truly experience the breadth of nuance from the opening sirens of War Pigs right through to the excellently rocking Fairies Wear Boots. It will make you a believer.